such is perception, such is its arising, such is its passing away. Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu. All right. So this is the same topic that we took last time. As you all know now, we have extracted this few verses from the discourse named Four Foundations of Mindfulness, which is the Bible, the handbook of those who practice mindfulness. And mindfulness is the basic teaching of Buddhism. So this is why, before getting on to any other area, we will have to go into detail of what we should actually do. So as we have already learned, there are four foundations or four references on which you can be mindful of according to the discourse, which is body, feelings, mind, and the phenomena. We have gone into detail of the first three, and now we are talking about the phenomena section, where we have covered one section which we call Nivarana, or the hindrances. Now what we are discussing is the second section of phenomena, that is the section of clinging aggregates. So in the last few sessions, we have discussed what clinging is, what aggregate mean, and then there are 5 things to which we cling. They are form, feelings, perception, mental volitions or the fabrications, and the consciousness. So we are on the third one. We have discussed in the past few sessions in detail clinging on forms and the gross layer of form and the subtle layer of form. And so far as feelings is concerned, also we discuss in the same manner. And I won't be going into detail of those things at this stage, but at a later stage today I'll be discussing them as well a little bit to get a bit of entry to the topic that we are going to discuss. Perception, in the last meeting, we identified, or we tried to learn to the best of our ability, the meaning of perception and how it affects our lives. Right? So the meaning of perception is the mental notes, or the shapes, shades, or manners, features, genders, etc., that we keep to distinctly identify one from the others, something from the rest of the things, right? Without which we won't be able to basically live, right? This perception, according to Buddha, he says it's a mirage. We go behind them, and when you reach them, there's nothing. It's like you do all your best to get through an exam, and once you get through the exam, there's nothing, right? You get the results, and just after the results, that's it. It's the same person, right? And similarly, it's just one example, the feeling that you get, and that does not mean that you should not do your exams. In that manner, we from childhood to the death, we go behind a lot of perception, and end of the day, there is nothing that we can actually hold on to, or that we can have permanently after struggling to get them. So we discussed in detail in taking a discourse that the Buddha has given about the diversity of elements, and then how this diversity of elements is leading to perception, and then how that diversity leads to a mirage in our life. So today, that's the gross layer of perception. Today, we are going to go a bit deep into perception. And this nature of perception is something that had been understood by those who lived even before Buddha. There were people practicing spirituality even before Buddha. And they knew this, that there is a struggle and there is nothing that we can hold on. And therefore, they wanted to find ways. And that is why when Lord Buddha went out, he saw a person who is wearing a saffron robe and shaven head. And before that, he saw dead people and sick people and old people. And with that, he was feeling the struggle that the people are taking, or the real issue that there is in the society. On one hand, and on the other hand, when he sees the recluse, he understood that there are people who are trying to move away and trying to find a way. And those people, although they practiced, they were not out of clinging. They were not out of clinging aggregates, right? Now, when they practiced the same way as the Buddha practiced, right? And they were taking many objects to practice mindfulness. And if I take the same object that we are using, which even they have used, when they bring the attention to their body, say for example to the breath or to the walking, right? What they do is they try to hold on to that object, right? Say breath, they try to hold on to the breath as much as possible. It is, although they try, you can't do it. The reason is, it is the nature of things. If you try to continuously be with it, what happens is you lose the interest in it. The married people know it. You lose the interest in it. And in economics, we call it diminishing marginal utility. It does not mean that economists have, or Buddha has learned from economists, and economists have borrowed it from Buddha, right? The word Buddha using is viranjana, in other words, dispassion, right? So when you keep on looking at the same thing, you don't enjoy it anymore. So it's like when you're thirsty, you will be given a very cool glass of water, and that will be the best drink that you have ever had, right? And after 5 minutes, you get another one, and you take that as well. Another 5 minutes, you get another one, and try to take, and you throw half. And another 5 minutes, you get another one. You say, I don't want. But he's pushing you, and you take the glass and throw the whole thing. Another 5 minutes, you get another one, and he's pushing you, and take that and pour on his head, right? Because you no longer want it, you don't enjoy it. So the same thing happens when you keep on observing. Although they try to hold on to it, it's the nature that dispassion happens, right? But when the dispassion is happening, because they have the attitude of holding on to the object, when that object is lost, in other words, when you observe the breath and when you are with the breath, and we call it form. And that is how, before Buddha, some people were holding onto the form, holding onto the breath, and therefore it was the clinging aggregate of form at the subtle layer, at the spiritual level, right? But they can't hold on to it, and it slips. Then what they do is, they realize when because they were keeping their attention, keeping their concentration onto the breath, they realized that it is very peaceful. They realized that it is mentally calming and also physically very peaceful, because you don't hack your body. You don't work the same way that you will be working in the sensual world. You simply observe your own breath, which is life, right? So, and that is physically as well as mentally very effective and efficient, right? So, although they have lost now the breath, they were observing that bodily rapture and the mental happiness will not go away. Then what they do is they cling on to that. They cling on to that mental physical rapture, the rapture that they feel, and the mental happiness. That is the feeling that we discussed a couple of weeks ago. They hold on to that. And then it becomes feeling aggregates at the subtle layer, not at the gross layer. Gross layer, it's all sensual. But if you are practicing in spiritual layer, this becomes clinging aggregate of feeling, right? Or feelings clinging aggregate. Now, what happens? The same principle. When you keep on observing that, you feel this bodily rapture is the one which is more prominent. And the bodily rapture, when you keep on observing, that fades away. When that fades away, or when you become dispassionate about it, right, then they start holding on to the mental calmness. They don't have the bodily rapture, but they will have the mental calmness, which is much more attractive than the bodily rapture. So they start clinging on to that. Right? That is also feeling, right? And then what happens is the same thing happens. You keep on observing the same thing and you become dispassionate about it. And at the same time, you become more and more efficient into your existence. You go into deeper layer of your existence. Now you are going from physical process to the mental process and deeper layers of the mentality, right? And what happens is when you lose this mental happiness as well, you will be in a complete empty space. In the sense, now when you look at this room, there are so many things here, right? But if you just keep on looking at a particular thing, and maybe your attention will go away from that, but to the vast space between. Now, say, for example, you all are looking at me, and I'm looking at you, right? And compared to the space between us, our object, my physical existence is much less. And we have a huge space here, right? So like that, if you go outside and lie down and look at the sky, initially you will see the sky. But if you keep on looking at it, there is vast space in between. We never see the space because we see the object, right? But when you become dispassionate of the object, it may be physical, may be mental, you get exposed into that vast space, which we call infinite space, right? And very peaceful now. There is nothing mental, nothing physical, but this is a perception layer. You distinctly identify that phenomena compared to everything else that you had before, right? They had bit of perceptions even there, but more, what was more prominent in those instances were than the perceptions, the particular thing that you observe. Right now here, it's completely, there is nothing, or not that there is nothing, there is an emptiness which you can perceive, right? And then you start clinging on to that. When you start clinging on to that, your mind will be knowing only that, right? Then what happens is you become dispassionate about that emptiness, and mind, you get absorbed into the mind, which we call infinite consciousness, right? And these things happen when you keep on practice. And even today, and this happened before Buddha, because they were clinging on to things. So when that emptiness goes away and they become so awareness of huge awareness that they get, right? And when they become, then they hold on to that. It's much more subtle, much more efficient. You can sit without eating, you can sit without drinking. It's so peaceful. There have been a lot of stories during Buddha's time. I will come to those things a little later. And even in the recent history, if some of you may have read a book by Venerable Balangoda Ananda, where he had written, I think it was the talks in Paris or something. He had, in one of the talks he had written during those days in early 1990s, I think. He had gone to Himalayas, and in Himalayas there have been ascetics who have been practicing for 200, 300 years. They're still alive because they go into those absorptions and they just sit. They just keep sitting. So like that, you can hang on to those perceptions. Now it is not form, it is not feelings, and they are going into from gross perceptions to subtler perceptions, which are spiritual perceptions, right? So once you get absorbed into this consciousness, infinite consciousness, and you keep on observing, you try to hold on to it as long as possible, but because of the nature of things, it slips as well, and then they go into a state where they don't have anything. They just sit, and what they say is, what do you observe? Nothing. They don't have any thoughts. They don't feel the body. They don't feel whether they are sitting or standing. They are not sleepy as well. They definitely know they are not sleeping. And they don't have any pain. They don't have any happiness. There is nothing for them to say, right? They know that they have been in nothingness or in a situation where they don't feel anything. Only once they come out, they don't know what happened before that, right? And Buddha says that is the state of no thing, and therefore they call it nothingness. And what happens is even that goes away. You become dispassionate of nothingness as well, because it is not lasting forever as well, right? And when that happens, they think that it is the best because you have gone out of everything, and you are experiencing a situation where you don't feel the world, right? So people thought those days, and that is the highest state where people can go to, and they thought that is arahanthood. But what happened was, even before Buddha, there was another stage after that. You come out of that nothingness and come to a very subtle perception, which we call neither perception nor non-perception. They just feel something, but they can't say whether it's a thought or whether it's the body or whether it's the feeling, whether it's emptiness or whether it's consciousness. They can't exactly say. There is a subtle vibration. During daytime, if you go out and look at the sky, there are some energy waves you can see. And like that, you may feel something, but you can't say whether it's exactly that. Therefore, no perception, right? And since you see something, you can't say that there is no perception as well at the same time. So it's neither perception, no non-perception state. And that was the highest that Buddha's teachers, so-called teachers, or the people to whom the Buddha went before his enlightenment knew. And once Buddha achieved those states, they said, okay, I have 500 students, you take 250, I take 250, and we will do the business, right? Buddha felt in that subtle layer, there is a fine struggle to maintain it. When there is a perception like that, and since you have got to be concentrated on it, and since you have got to hold on to it, because if you let it go, you will get exposed to the rest of the world, and all the problems comes to your head. So you have got to maintain this object to have peace in your mind. Buddha realized there is a struggle even there. It's a very fine struggle to maintain a very subtle perception. So these are the layers of perception. And before Buddha, people were hooked onto them and they were clinging onto them. And that is what the Buddha addressed in this clinging aggregates. Right? It's not just the perception, even the form and the feeling. Now, this stage is a bit dangerous. The reason is, we were having a chat before you all came. When this happens to the people who really practice well, and during the period before Buddha, since there was no one to guide, and they were really in the soup, right? And the best example is the example of ascetic Asita. Ascetic Asita, when he was presented with the small prince, it said, this prince is going to preach a doctrine, a teaching that no other person has taught, and he will be finding a way to eradicate suffering. And then he smiled. After that, he started crying, because he knew when he was preaching this teaching, ascetic Asita will be dead, and he will go to a realm where he can't come out even if he wants to. He's stuck there. He knows that even. To that extent, you get hooked onto those things. You cling onto those things. You can't come out even if you want, because you don't know the technique. The technique has not been used from the beginning. The wrong technique has been used from the beginning. And therefore, you get hooked onto it, and you keep on going with that. And the other example is Alara Kalama Uddaka Ramaputra, where they wanted to share the resources they had. And the other example is ascetic Kassapa brothers. Kassapa brothers also, they claim that they were Arahant, and Buddha had to do few miracles to show that they are not Arahants. Buddha is Arahant. And then all of them with 1,000 disciples, they became disciples of the Buddha and said, please teach us the way that you practice. Right? So therefore, this stage is a bit dangerous, because although you go to these levels, you may not be going out of suffering on one hand. And on the other hand, you will get psychic powers. If you get psychic powers, you naturally get attracted to that. And if you get attracted to that, that's the end of the path. There is a discourse called Brahmajala. In English, it is called net of views. And in that, Buddha explains, I exactly don't remember, but in total, there are different sections in it. In total, there are 62 junctions, 62 stages. For those who practice well, will go wrong. Right? So under perceptions, there are few, I don't remember the number. So that is what is happening in the Buddhist world today, those who practice. And in Sri Lanka, you know, there are so many monks telling fortune, right? Healing people. They can. They really do, because they have practiced and they have received those powers. And they get attracted to that. And when there is a miracle, people think that monk is higher than Lord Buddha. And they start going behind them. Right? And the other thing is, you get some dangerous perceptions as well. you may go into a state where you may get hooked into certain phenomena that may come in your head. Say, for example, those who say that the Buddha was born in Sri Lanka, right? When you practice well, and your mind becomes so sharper, and when mind becomes so sharp, and if you are not in control of your mind, if you don't have the mindfulness in the right manner, then the other perceptions, the other messages that are coming, you think that they are real. And when you think that they are real, you become part of it. Right? In one of the books, someone had written, while practicing, I exactly don't remember the story as I remember it. While practicing, he has seen a butterfly. And he has been observing the butterfly. He has been with the butterfly. And finally he writes, he came to a state where he could not distinguish whether a man is looking at the butterfly or a butterfly is looking at the man. You become what you see. Then you don't believe anything else. So this is why people start saying that there is a creator to this world. There are the beings in the world, and they might be able to affect you. They might be able to relate to you. When those things happen, your perception will completely change. And there are perceptions where you can do anything in the name of God, and that is a highly skillful thing. Right? Irrespective of whether good or bad, irrespective of whether you harm other beings or not. Right? So those are perceptions that come to people who have been practicing. So therefore, this stage is very dangerous in the sense you may get hooked onto or go away from Buddha's path. Right? So the question is, what did Buddha do? What he did was he just changed the coin on the other side. In other words, before Buddha, people were trying to maintain the object. What Buddha did was, at the very beginning of the 4 foundations of mindfulness, when he was introducing how to be mindful of the breath, in the first few sentences he says, keep the mindfulness to the fore, taking your body as the focal point, taking your body as the reference point, right? So when he does that, he's very cleverly eliminating our attention going outside. So outside forces, they may come, but you will relate it to your body, right? So attention will be inward rather than outward. And the other thing is, because you keep your attention focused to the body, it is nothing but that your mind is telling, but it becomes your own experience. Your body is never going to lie you, but we don't know what our mind is telling. Right? Mind can do anything to take you away from the practice. But body, it's just a physical process. It doesn't know the language of lying, language of deceiving, right? Language of misleading. If it is painful, if it is burning, it is burning. Right? If it is throbbing, it is throbbing. Right? So therefore, Buddha says to have the experience, because in his teaching, it is not just a doctrine, it is something that you can become. It is something that you can experience, practice and reach there. So therefore, you will have to keep your focal or keep your attention, keep your focus point, prime reference point, the body. And then The most important thing is keep the mindfulness to the fore, not the object to the fore, right? Not concentration to the fore, not holding on to the object. You keep the mindfulness to the fore. This is why when we practice, in walking practice, what we say is, you walk, but give me as much information as possible. You sit and observe whatever that comes. Give information of those things. So what it does is, it trains your mind not to keep that object, but to see what happens to that object. Then you will not be trying to hold on to anything. You allow the nature to take its course, and you simply become an observer, very awakened observer, to tell what is going on, right? So the object is naturally changing. You don't try to hold on to it. Initially, when you start breathing, it is long, but when you keep on observing, it becomes subtler and it becomes subtler and it becomes shorter. You let it happen and you observe what is happening. And when you further observe it, it goes even deeper and deeper. You observe even those things. And it may come to a point that you don't feel breath at all, but instead you may feel choking. You keep observing that as well. Not that you stop that and then take a deep breath. There are teachers even today in Queensland who are asking students to take a deep breath when the breath becomes subtle, which is completely the opposite, which is given in 4 Foundations of Mindfulness, right? So therefore, what Buddha did was keep the mindfulness to the fore and let anything that changes change, but can you keep observing it? If you keep observing it, that is how you don't get attached to what is changing. That is how you learn the art of letting go. He's not telling all that. He simply says, keep the mindfulness to the fore and then keep on observing. So things keep changing. And it may go from the form that we are observing the breath will change naturally. And then you start feeling the feelings, maybe the painful feelings or the pleasant feelings, no matter. You keep observing that as well. So you may have rapture, you keep observing that as well, and that fades away. And then you may feel mentally happy, you keep observing that as well. And you may go to empty space, you keep observing that as well. You don't hold on to anything. And what the teachers would do is, when these things are happening, and of course the practitioner will not know. He will say, no, I was practicing and breath was subtle, and then suddenly I went into huge space. And then the teachers will not accept, because it may be a trick of the mind as well. And teachers will, okay, tell me what happened before that. Why we ask that is because we will have to ensure whether you try to cling on to what is experiencing, or whether you continuously maintain your mindfulness. Maintaining continuous mindfulness is called clear comprehension. In Pali, we call it sampajanya, right? So clear comprehension means you very clearly understand, very clearly sees, very clearly observes, very clearly knows what is happening. And if you can give those steps, this is what happened, this is what happened, this is what happened, and these are the things that disappeared, these are the few things that came in, and then I went into this. Then the teacher knows, okay, he has followed the right step, and he's keeping the mindfulness to the fore, and then ask him to keep on observing that as well. No problem. Keep on observing that as well. See how you go in and see how you lose it, and then see how it comes again. And then keep on observing that as well. So it's the same experience as you may get, but the way you look at will be different, right? So therefore, when those things happen, since you don't practice the way the ascetics who are practicing before Buddha. You practice the way the Buddha is asking us to practice. Then, as I said earlier, you learn the art of giving up. The experiences become different. You don't cling on to the object. You let the object that is coming up fade away, and you just observe. And when you observe and when you don't try to cling on, what you give up is the clinging, which is a negative energy that you have, right? And that negative energy will leave you, start leaving, right? And how you feel that negative energy leaving you is sometimes when you go to a party, you may feel that you don't belong there. You may feel that some worms are dancing, what these people are doing, right? So that is because you are now moving away. Your sensitivity is high. Sensitivity is high with yourself, and you can see what is happening around you in a different perspective, right? So in that manner, Buddha has changed the way how you look at your object, and how you will maintain awakened mentality when the object is changing, and thereby avoiding the friction, avoiding unwanted struggle to maintain the object, right? So with that, and another important thing I want to point out here is even to do this, what Buddha is using is the perception. Without perception, you won't be able to tell what you feel with your breath. You won't be able to tell what you feel, or you can't give any information to me without having perception. So when you walk, you should be able to tell, okay, this is how I place my leg. First the heel, and when I put the heel down, and then I felt a vibration, and I felt that vibration to this extent, and then rest of the foot went down, and then the toes went down, and then the leg was pressed, and when the leg was pressed, I was feeling the coldness or the warmth. All those are perceptions. So Buddha is using perception to remove the object itself, right? You don't keep the perceptions of the object, but you go to the nature of the object, go to the interaction of the object with you, and then try to get those perceptions. So to get rid of perception, he is using perception. Otherwise, what happens is, like before Buddha, it's like the story of the fig tree. And I mean, I think all of you have seen fig trees. What happens is, in a fig tree, when it grows up, after it is grown to a certain extent, the suckers are coming from the branches to the floor, to the earth. When the suckers are there and gone around, you won't be able to see the actual trunk of the tree or the root. Can't see. So that is what happened before Buddha, right? They get hooked onto the object, and then that particular perception, and then they get some psychic powers, and psychic powers take the main role, and they completely forget the object and completely forget the practice. So the suckers that are coming from the practice are taking away everything and moving away from actually what they have been doing, right? So therefore, what Buddha did was, when there were showing of psychic powers, he condemned them. right? He condemned them so much. And I don't remember exactly which arahant. One of the arahants had shown some psychic powers in one situation. And then some monks have gone and told Buddha. And then Buddha, I think it was Venerable Anuruddha, called Venerable Anuruddha and blasted him, saying, you would have removed your clothes in front of a prostitute. Has condemned it so much. It's not something that a practitioner should do, because people get attracted to that rather than the real practice, real teaching, right? And also in one instance, Buddha has been waiting to cross a river. It's a famous one, you may have heard even before. He was waiting for the boat to come, right? And there was another ascetic who came and he just walked on water to the other side. And then the assistant who was with the Buddha at that time has asked, you are much more powerful than that. Why don't you do it? Then he has asked, how much is this boat charging to go on to the other side? Say $1. Then Buddha has said, what that ascetic did worth only $1. There's nothing much in it. And therefore he has condemned the psychic powers that you get in the practice so much, and not only condemned and showed a way how you can avoid those things. And those things may come. I'm not saying they're coming for everybody. Those things may come. Doesn't matter. If you are keeping the mindfulness to the fore, when they come, you just label them. Yes, I am aware. I know this is happening. Then its intensity will fade away. They won't be able to take over you, right? And this is why we have the discussion. When you practice, we don't know how much we have practiced in our previous lives. So they may have a good opening stop. So when you come and practice here, things may click. And there are instances, there have been instances like that. People progress very fast, right? So when those things happen, it is very important to have the discussion, so that the noble friend will be able to see how and where things are going and assist when and wherever is necessary. So with that, I think you have now some understanding to the best of your ability of what clinging perception is, right? And these are deeper layers of the mind. And in our next meeting, hopefully in the new year, we are going into another layer of the mind, which we call mental volition or fabrication. So with that reminder, I wish you all well and conclude my discussion on clinging perception, and we can go for our discussion, or if you have any question, you can put forward now, exactly on the dot. Anything to discuss, any report? Trish, can I request you to say something about your practice, if you don't mind?
I found the discussion, your talk tonight, very deep, and I guess what I got from it was with clinging perception, it's important to keep our mindfulness as the focus and just keep coming back to that mindfulness, to be aware and observe, like the breathing, look at the form, be aware of the feelings, and also not to be holding on to anything. So observing it, understanding it, and letting that go. But those things can keep coming back. So each time it's recognizing that and consciously letting that go. In terms of the meditation, it's a slow process for me. Each time I find I'm able to do it a little bit more. I'm able to do it with less distraction. So, but it's slow progress for me.
No, that's okay. That's good. And so far as the comment on the talk is concerned, and you have got the message, that's very important. But what I really expected was while walking, what you observe and what you try to observe and what you actually could observe. And yeah, and while sitting, the same thing, what you try to observe and what you actually observe, things like that would be very important for me to give you a hand.
So while I'm walking, I have to keep reminding, like I'll have stray thoughts about things that have been happening in the day or that I've got coming up in the future. So as I become aware of that, I try and focus on the feelings of my foot connecting with the floor and feeling like the vibrations going up my leg as I walk. So I try and focus on that, and then I'll find I'll drift off and another thought will be there, but I'll become aware of that and then take my mind back to it. Sometimes if I'm struggling, I'll actually start to count my breaths to help me clear those thoughts away.
Yeah. Okay. So in other words, what I hear is that your attention is mainly affected by the stray thoughts.
Yeah.
And sometimes you are able to be mindful of that, and then the attention comes to the leg.
Yes.
And when the attention comes to the leg, you can use that opportunity to see more details of the walking. Now you said you feel the vibrations. That's good. And other than that, you can see which leg the attention come to, and then at what stage it is, whether it's lifting stage or the moving stage or the placing stage or the pressing stage. And if it is lifting stage, whether you are lifting the heel or whether you are lifting the toes, like that. Try to see more details when the attention comes to the leg, and then try to be more vigilant to observe the next as well, the next little bit as well, next thought moment as well. So in that manner, we activate our mind to be more with the walking, so that it will not have the mind will not have any space, any opportunity for a stray thought to come. That's one technique. The other technique is we can use labeling. While walking, we can label. When you take the right foot, you label from its start, from its lifting, right. So your attention will be with the right foot, and then you will see how the leg is moving. And once it is placed, you can slowly observe whatever sensation that you observe. And then when you go to the left, you do the same thing, left, and then observe the left leg. In that manner, once again, what we do is we try to avoid, we keep the mind engaged with what we are doing. So therefore, we take away the opportunity that the mind has to bring other thoughts instead, if it makes sense.
Yes, that does. That's very helpful, because what I haven't been doing that. I've been like, to try and keep my mind clear of the thoughts, I've focused on my breath instead of, which I need to do now, is to focus on the movement and the feelings from my feet. And like you said, I will use that technique of, focusing on right or left, whichever is happening. And I think that will absolutely help me.
Yeah, it's rather than focusing, start labeling.
Yeah.
Slowly in the mind, so that mind is occupied. And the other thing that you have done, observing the breath while walking, it's a suggestion of the mind to mislead, because when the breath becomes prominent while walking, it becomes a bit more peaceful, and you may feel that it is a better thing, and it's natural as well. But it's a trick of the mind to
Yes.
take our attention away from the actual thing we want to focus. So with this, I think we will be able to go further in the walking. And
Yes.
anything that you can mention about the sitting?
It's the same with the sitting. When my mind starts to drift with other thoughts, I've been using a focus on my breath to bring me to try and clear those thoughts. So are there some other strategies that I might be better using for the sitting?
No, if are you able to bring your attention back to the breath when thoughts fade away?
Yes. When I become aware of it, like it depends, like sometimes I might drift further and others less. So as soon as I've become aware of that, then I'll start counting breaths and try and focus on that.
Yeah, you start counting breath.
Yeah.
Yeah. So how many counting do you usually do?
I'll count 4 breaths in and hold it for 2, and then count out 6 and hold it for 2. And then just keep repeating that till I've got those thoughts out of my head.
Yeah. I mean, it's good technique to bring the attention, but it's mainly making you concentrated on the breath.
Yes.
So, but what the disadvantage of that technique is, it takes our attention away from the reality, because it is something that we induce, and it is not the actual thing that is happening. So therefore, even here, what we can do is, if the mind wanders away, and if wandering away is too much and it is bothering you, then what we can do is we can occupy our mind with the respiration. When the in-breath is happening, as it happens, we start labeling in, and when out-breath is happening, out.
Okay, yeah.
So it will be with the same thing that we do, and then if we can observe anything, when the in-breath is coming, whether it is coming from both the nostrils or it is only one nostril, or whether it is when it is coming in, whether you feel cold or warm, or whether you feel it in your chest or tummy. So just pick one point and then do that labeling. Okay. And try to observe the sensation as well at the same time, so that once again there will not have any opportunity for thoughts to occur.
Yeah.
And there is one good thing in your report, another good thing in your report, that is, now you are able to see this process. You are able to see that we don't have a control over our own breath. We can't keep our attention, and our own walking, we can't keep our attention. So that is a good understanding. We try, but still mind does not stay. So by seeing this entire process is the mindfulness. Unless you are mindful, you don't see this. So this is the first lesson. By being mindful, we know that it is not easy, but many things are happening, and I can be aware of the many things happening. So to that extent, it's a very, very good experience. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you. And any other question from here? Comment? There was something or not on the fence? Right.
Are you talking to me? Sorry.
No.
Oh, no. Okay.
Yeah, that's okay. And even from the other ladies, I may expect a report in the new year. So it is because without you're talking of the practice. I cannot know what's going on because I don't have psychic powers. So, but when I listen to you, I get the psychic power and how it is going on. So that is why I ask someone to consider the report every time. And usually the singular group, one after the other, one after the other, one after the other, they want to say what's happening. Right? Because that's very helpful. You may not get a lot of things, but they will have one message that may help your practice. So this is why you should talk. Of course, you get a lot of information while listening to the others, but when you talk, it becomes your own, and it is not just the information that you give, the manner you give, and the depth that you give, and the opportunity that you give me to question is very important. Right. So with that, I would like to conclude the session. Sorry, you have not acceptable from you anyway. Right. Go ahead.
It's about the talk today, the Dhamma talk. So when you talk, should I come closer? Yeah, she should. So in the Dhamma talk, so you talk about infinite space, infinite consciousness, nothingness, neither perception nor non-perception, which are generally mentioned in as arupa jhana or immaterial absorption, which is synonymous with concentration practice or some of the practice. This topic's always avoided when we do mindfulness or insight meditation. But is that actually what, when you do like insight meditation, do you actually get immaterial absorption, or is it the characteristic? Or is it the same thing? Or is it no different?
Yeah, it's the same thing. It's the same thing, but only thing is our attitude towards that is different. Our approach is different. It's the same experience, but there what happens is we let that go. And when I say let that go, not that as soon as you see it, following day it goes, right? Our mind, we are working with the mind. Mind is not easily giving it up. Mind gets sucked into it, gets absorbed into it. Since we have practiced, since we have come to that stage, keeping the mindfulness to the fore, mindfulness will take the lead. Mindfulness will see what's going on. So in a sitting, this happens in many cycles. When it happens in cycles more than once, when the frequency is increasing, what it is generally doing is the duration that you get sucked into reduces, which means your clinging reduces. I'm not quite sure whether I answered the question.
It's a good answer. The reason also I have some follow-up questions. So I've heard before some objects you look at, so like we look at maybe breath and like walking sensation, they're not conducive for absorption, or it's actually not possible, I've heard, to get absorbed into that particular object. They're like vipassana or mindfulness objects. But this doesn't seem to be the case. So
are you saying absorption is not possible while walking and it is more possible in sitting?
I'll give you the example. I heard in one question and answer session from Venerable Dhammajiva, there was some guy, I think he was in Perth, he was talking about absorption from concentration aspect. And then Venerable Dhammajiva asked, what's your object? And he said, rising and falling of the stomach. And he said, basically what he said was, this object is not conducive for absorption. You're talking like what you're talking about is not real. And he quoted the Mahasi Sayadaw saying that this object can't be used for absorption. Is that something that actually happens? Like there are certain objects that don't lead to absorption and certain objects that can lead to absorption.
Yes, that object cannot be used for absorption. The reason is rising and falling is a verb. Yeah, it's when you do things, it is not static, it is not a noun, right? But instead, if you take the breath, right? Instead of breathing, if you take the breath, you can hold on to the breath. Rising and falling is something that is changing, so therefore you can't take that as an absorption object. But still, I may say, although you don't get absorbed materially in the form of a form, right? We have absorption in the form, right? But you may get absorbed in the feeling level from the same object. Does it make sense?
So you could get absorption, but it's not like the absorption you think of with samatha, like material absorption. You can go straight to like an immaterial absorption. Yeah. Okay. Yeah, okay. I do have more questions about it, but I think I'll leave it. I have more questions, I think, but I have a good thing. Okay.
Although we say material absorption is not possible there. So from the object, material absorption is not possible. But after observing the rising and falling, if the rapture arises in your body, so you go away from that particular object, but you may get absorbed into the rapture in the body. So then the object has changed, but still you could get absorbed. And it's a mixture of bodily sensations and the mind involvement. It's not the form as it is in strict sense. There is a mental aspect as well. Yeah.
So generally, I've heard, or if you do concentration practice, generally a teacher will teach you up to fourth absorption, and then they consider that the middle point, and you stop concentration, and then you do mindfulness or insight meditation. Whereas it sounds like here we go straight into the immaterial absorption, or it can happen. You go into immaterial absorption. Is that what they mean by like stopping at fourth absorption and going into immaterial? Is that why they do that? So generally what I've heard was, if you're doing concentration practice, you would do practice up to fourth absorption. So the last material absorption. And then generally the teacher will say, that's enough. You need to go do mindfulness or insight meditation. And it sounds like in insight meditation, you go past fourth absorption and you can go into immaterial absorption. Is that the reason why they do a cutoff?
The cutoff there is because after that you are going into deeper layers of mental process, deeper layers of the immaterial state. So when you go to deeper layers of immaterial state, your opportunity to experience things will fade away because you are not in the material realm anymore. So therefore, at the fourth absorption, you are still to a certain extent with the materiality. So you will be able to experience whatever experiences that may come from your practice. So that is why they change it at the fourth absorption level. Having said that, you can change even from first. Even from first, it can be changed. And in Four Foundations of Mindfulness, he is not talking about absorptions at all. He's straight away taking the real practice. He's straight away taking away the mistake that before Buddha has happened. And to take that away, what he did was take the body as the object and keep the mindfulness to the fore. Then concentration will come with the changing object. Now, in the concentration practice, what happens is they keep the object and try to be concentrated on the object. So after getting concentrated, then you will have to induce mindfulness. So that is why at the fourth absorption level, when the mind is so subtle, so sharp, then they ask the student to be aware of that. Then only they are introducing the mindfulness. Whereas in direct practice, you start keeping the mindfulness to the fore.
It's interesting you mentioned like you can go in the talk that you can become like really disassociated or not know what the perception is. There was actually this there's a Sri Lankan monk who came here a couple of years ago, and he was a very odd person because he was like mentally not there or he was enlightened and you couldn't tell the difference because he was, I don't know how to explain that, but he did a couple of talks here. And I think he did say something about his practice. I think he had a mirror and he'd be looking at an object and he looked at the object in the mirror and then he keep like swapping between the two and then he couldn't differentiate the object in the mirror and the real object. He was doing some funny things like this. And yeah, so he was like this really odd person. It was really weird. Like he wasn't there. Like sometimes ask him a question. He didn't know what you'd asked him. And then they'll be giving some brilliant, weird answers. Anyway, I didn't think too much about it afterwards, but I met someone like that and I didn't understand why he was like that.
No, that is how hallucinations happen. This is why Buddha wanted to practice with a verifiable object. Right? When you look at a mirror and look at outside, you are conditioning your mind. Instead of doing that, he starts from where you are with the body, rather than hallucination. Now, in Sri Lanka, what happens is all these people pop up like mushroom and then vanish. Now, I know this story, and and they are not in the scene. Yeah, I mean, a lot of other things happen relating to that, those people, and yeah, Buddha has very clearly given a practice, and we will have to given very methodical steps to go, how it will progress. So we will just stick to that. And having said that, keep asking questions as well, so that you will have to be sure of what you are doing, not just because I say. All right, Thiruvan Saranai. So we will chant the final stanzas to transfer the positive energies that we have generated.